Welcome to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast where Peter and I talk about all the things that maybe plague us, maybe excite us over business ownership, relate it back to obviously owning a business together, being husband and wife, and also being mom and dad to two rambunctious boys. Today, I am super excited because we have Lindsay White with us. She is the owner and I'm going to say the star power behind High Voltage Leadership. Lindsay, one of the things that I love that you tout all the time is that you are all about unlocking potential. I love that phrase. I love that term. Lindsay's worked with lots of leaders, lots of businesses, including Calgary International Airport, ATB Financial, lots and lots of cool folks. But, she's here today to maybe wrangle Peter and I in a little bit in a conversation all about leadership. So Lindsay, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to be here. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So today I thought what we could do is we could have a bit of a chit chat about, I guess what I'd say, the state of leadership in business today. I'm a little bit curious about what are you hearing from your clients? How are people feeling about things? Obviously, we're in this interesting point in the world. We were just right before we hit record talking about artificial intelligence as an example. So I feel like we're in this part of life where all of a sudden things are changing a lot and there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and so be cool to reflect on kind of where leaders are at, how they're feeling. I just, before we get into that, before we get into the questions, I'm on your website right now, and I gotta say I'm looking at this one section from feeling burnt out to feeling on fire again, and I just love, there's a couple of questions on there that really caught my attention, so I'm just going to read them because they really, for me personally, really resonated. So do you ever ask yourself, am I the only one who cares about my business? It's such an interesting question that, entrepreneurs and leaders, I think, often ask themselves. And anyways, we could dive into that. Does your team care about your vision, or do they do just enough to get by? So really, I wanted to kind of put those out there. There's a few more questions. I really encourage you to go to highvoltageleadership.ca to, first of all, check out Lindsay's amazing website, because it's beautiful and it looks awesome. But there's some really, really thought-provoking questions on there. So before we come in, maybe kind of dive into some of those questions. What is the state of leadership today? Are leaders just like killing it and feeling great, or worried and staying up at night and not sleeping?
Yeah. No, you know what? I think it's a great question and a great topic. I think many leaders are feeling really burnt out and overwhelmed. I think that's true for almost all of us post-COVID. I don't know that we've completely figured out what this post-COVID world really looks like. We're still in recovery. And let me just acknowledge, COVID was traumatic for all of us on different levels. And I think as people leaders, we really absorbed a lot of that from our teams and our staff. Whether you're a leader in a bigger more matrixed organization, or you're someone that I work with is leading your own business. I think we as leaders, we really observed and handled a lot of that anxiety, that frustration, that unknowingness for ourselves and for others and for our families too, right? Because we're all parents, we are all partners, we are all aunties and uncles, and right, we have lots of people that we care about. And so I think for many leaders, really feeling the exhaustion, the overwhelm. And I see so many right now who are saying, what can I do? Like they're unsure even of how to support the recovery and the resilience building, which is tricky for a lot of organizations and especially for small business owners.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was like 6 weeks in, right, to the major lockdown, maybe even longer, because, I'm not very in touch with my emotions. But I remember sitting down at my computer and having a good old cry because of just that. I had not thought about it and what we were going through on my own. But here I was over the past 2 months playing this key support person for a staff who, was scared, who at the time we had to, do some fancy dancing around what we were going to be paying them and how we were going to be paying them. For clients, we have tons in the tourism space that were we were either hitting pause or trying to figure out how we could get some payment plans, or just playing the role of counselor in a time when I was completely unequipped to be doing that. And you're looking around and you're going, wow, I've dealt with everyone else's problems ish, but I haven't even reflected on this for myself. So like you're bang on, because that was my experience 100%.
Yeah. And I don't think you're alone. I think I saw leaders, I supported a variety of different leaders through COVID. And really what I saw was the fight, flight, or freeze, right? So there were some, we all hate the word, but there were some that were really able to pivot. They got over the initial sort of 6-week shock, had the good cry, and said, okay, I've got to figure this out. Like, I can't, this is my family, this is my livelihood, my house might be on the line, right?
Right.
Then there were some that were absolutely paralyzed. They couldn't move. And they were so hijacked, they couldn't even see straight. And then there were some that just, completely abandoned it, right? Like they just had to walk away. And it was very interesting for me to watch that. I think the tricky part now is that we're trying to figure out exactly what is the response.
Right.
And we're not sure. And, although COVID is still present, it's not the pressing issue. But we have international wars and conflict. We have inflation at an all-time high. We have COVID loans that so many of us are, struggling mightily to pay back, and what that does to a business that's trying to get on its feet. And I think we're still carrying sort of a big emotional load. And you said it, we're not always equipped to deal with that, or that we feel like we have to carry everyone else's and in that not acknowledge our own, which I think is really tricky for leaders. You need space and you need the capacity, and you just need to be human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I made a note to mention the COVID loans, because I feel like this is now the next impending sort of thing that's happening, and all this stress that's on a lot of businesses' minds. I don't know if this is the accurate number, but I was listening to the news the other day. I think it's like 700,000 small businesses in Canada still have to repay their COVID. Like, that's a massive, massive number of people. And obviously, if the money was there to repay those loans, they would have probably repaid them by now. So I don't know what a lot of businesses are going to do. Like as a marketing professional and as a marketing agency owner, I look at that and think, oh, I better buckle up, because the next 6 months might be a little hairy in terms of people won't have money for marketing. They might not have money because, right. And so it's like, yeah, it adds a lot of layers of stress and anxiety. And then on top of that, I think, COVID really started to make us all question on the state of work and the future of work. I think there's an entire conversation happening now about what does work look like in a post-COVID world. So I'm curious what your clients are kind of talking about when it comes to that specific conversation around the future of work.
So here's the interesting part. Work was evolving already. COVID accelerated that, right? So for many of us, we went home on Friday. We never went back to work on Monday, right? That was March of 2020. The reality is the remote or hybrid work environment was coming for us. And the other thing that was coming for us that I'm not sure why it was a surprise was this war on talent. The generations have successively gotten smaller since the boomers. So my parents are boomers. They're in their mid 70s. They were born in like 47. That's the leading edge of the boom, right? We knew that. We knew there were fewer people to fill the same number of jobs. And so I find it quite interesting that people still, even sort of a year out, are like, well, I just don't understand where all the workers went. Well, they retired, sweetie. Like, right. It was that they decided not to go back to work after COVID because it just was too much hassle. And and they took there's 2 years off, and they're like, well, I'm not going back to work. Like, the math was actually pretty straightforward. And successive generations, the Gen Zs and the millennials, they are far more comfortable working at home. And COVID again reinforced that that's perfectly normal and totally acceptable, and businesses can run that way. The tricky part is that we still have some real traditionalists running some of our largest organizations. And we've seen very recently the call to go back to work, the command, essentially, thou shalt return to the office 5 days a week. I see that as a real tricky, because you have, these younger generations, people, I'm going to say people under the age of 30 that just aren't interested in that for the most part. They want the flexibility. That's a value for them. And if organizations and leaders can't honor that value and cannot lead effectively in that space, organizations are going to have a problem. I think it's actually where small businesses can have a real win.
Yeah.
You could pick up
it's interesting.
great talent if you could figure it out.
It's interesting that you say that, because we were just having this conversation. We were just reviewing one of our staff 90-day review, and we were talking about, it's her first 90 days, and we're a fully remote team, which is not something that she was necessarily used to. And we were talking about the challenges of that and some of the things that you need to do in order to kind of compensate for that. And we need to put 15-minute time, meetings into our calendars just to have little catch-ups with our colleagues, because you used to just do that, right? Informally, that used to just happen in the office. And so now you have to be deliberate about it, right? So there's definitely, I think, a lot of, we're lucky because we built our business around the culture of working from home. So I feel like we've automatically incorporated a lot of this in, but I feel like a lot of these businesses probably don't have that as part of their culture. So it must be a real struggle for some of these leaders to figure out, how do I do this? How do I keep my culture great and my people happy? Right? Yeah.
It totally is. So I like to talk about leading by accident. So when we're all in the same physical space, we bump into with people. That's how a lot of our leadership is literally done without any intention at all. When we are remote or even in a hybrid environment, when we only see each other part-time, we have to lead with intention. Well, that's an entirely new level of leadership, right? So there are a lot of, and it's not just returning to the workplace and sorting out what is the right situation, what's the right calculation, but as teams grow. So even if you had a very small but remote team, that was far easier to get your arms around as a leader. Now, as your business starts to accelerate and you move from 10 to 20 to 30 employees, there's not enough time in the week to talk to everybody, even if you do 15-minute stand-ups, let alone have a half an hour or 45-minute one-on-one. Yeah. So you have to be very intentional about what that looks like. And you have to do it from the human out. What does the individual need? What do people on these teams need? And then how do I need to show up? Or what does that structure need to look like so that they can perform at their best? Not the other way around, not what I need as a leader. What do they need in order to be led effectively, and reverse engineer it?
Yeah. I think that's so true from the perspective of, the drag and drop. I feel like, I got into some, a little bit of when it's like you have a process and you follow I'm following the process. This is how we review people. This is how we connect with people. If you're a leader, this is how we do it. Step 1 through 10, and that's your success. And I think, last year, Peter, as our visionary in the company, really kind of pushed me into, what if we had principles instead of just policies? And, we've talked about my leadership style on your podcast, Lindsay, already. So as that driver and, that person, it's like, okay, I like the list. Here I go. And okay, now you're principles. Now I have to kind of think outside the lines, and I have to be okay with, Peter's going to do it different than me, but also I have to be okay with, all right, if, Janine and Karen both report to me, principally, this is how I'm going to handle it, but it's not going to be a drag and drop, and the same thing for both of them. And I think working from home or remote working really makes it become very clear very quickly. I know Janine wants to come and sit around the kitchen table with me, and I love that. And she forces me there because she knows I'd never leave this office if I could. Whereas Karen, she's a little bit further away, but she values the fact that we can connect online and have meaningful interactions this way, and it works for her. And I think, again, this kind of generational differences or stuck in your ways, it can be a real challenge.
It can be. And, on my podcast, we talked about that we need to show up differently and use different leadership approaches in different situations and for different individuals. And so it really is a very human-centered focus. it will make us uncomfortable as a leader. Like, this is one thing for sure. Leadership should leave you feeling uncomfortable almost all the time, because it is a constant evolution and growth cycle. There will be lots of moments where you think, yep, I nailed that. And then there should be lots of other moments where you think, I'm not exactly sure what to do here. The trick is to have the confidence in your own ability to adapt, and knowing that adaptability is actually a leadership attribute. That's the key that I think a lot of leaders miss. And then you add the skills and the experience along the way. Like, there are clearly tools, some checklists for those of you that love to check boxes. Are there some checklists? 100%. Is there actually an opportunity to take a back seat? For so many of us, we think leadership means being at the front of the room. In fact, leading from behind is a real evolutionary skill in terms of your leadership. Right? So maybe it's not about you checking off the boxes. Maybe it's about your team member coming to you and you say, okay, how do you want this conversation to look? What do you want to get out of this? And that's really inspiring for some people. Other people would feel deeply uncomfortable with that. They're not in the right, maybe they're not as far along in their own leadership development journey. And they really need you to be more directive, more present, more at the front, right? And then you two, the co-leadership. I mean, that's something that sometimes blows people right out of the water.
It's true.
Right? You said you have very different leadership styles. You're different people. Yeah. How do you lead in a business together? How do you lead as a team, right? So I work with lots of organizations that there's a business owner and then there's a leadership team. Right? How do you get 3 or 4 people who all have very different roles, responsibilities, but all have leadership accountability to work together in order to, as you said, to grow the culture, to reinforce the values, and ultimately to make the mission and vision come alive? That's sometimes the most difficult part.
I would say that's probably really difficult. It's interesting. Christina and I have been having a lot of conversations lately about, what size do we want to be? Where do we want to be, right? And we had this sort of growth for a long time, just grow, and then we started reflecting back, and why, for what, right? And really, growing means more, to your point, more managing of people, more building a leadership team, trying to get the leadership team to manage people. There's a lot of work and a lot of energy that has to go into all of that, right? And especially, I think, in this deliberate environment that you're talking about, everybody's working from home, everybody needs a bit of a customized approach in terms of how they're being led. It seems very daunting to me, and we started to look at some numbers and some spreadsheets, and we thought, wow, we actually can actually have a much more comfortable company that is actually making really good profit, and we can be paid quite well, and we can have more work-life balance and all these things by actually not focusing on growth, but by actually being right-sized and being the right size to serve our customers really well. And it was a very enlightening conversation. I would just say that both of us had a conversation about having to put our egos aside, because you start a business and it's all growth, and that's what everybody tells you. You gotta grow, or you gotta, that's it. So I'm just curious, in terms of the different businesses and the different leaders you talk to, I mean, is growth just the absolute ultimate mindset on every business's mind, or are you finding that companies are asking themselves more reflective questions and sort of deciding what size they should be? Is that a question that comes up?
Yeah. I wish it came up more often. So I do think that it is very present in a lot of the spaces that we hang out as entrepreneurs and small business owners, this message that you have to scale, you have to grow, you got to grow your business. Are you growing? Are you scaling to 6 figures or 7 figures or 8 figures and beyond? Right? Yeah. That is, and I say that as an individual who is on social media and sees that message ad nauseum.
Yeah.
I think that your approach is actually excellent, because scaling at all cost, in fact, isn't worth it. And I would also say, my argument in particular is that a lot of organizations grow and scale, sometimes without intention, like the business just takes off. But what they fail to understand is the people strategy.
Mhm.
because it is the humans in the business that actually do the work that create the momentum to scale, right? We've got a
Yeah.
business plan, we got a vision, we got a mission, we got a marketing plan, maybe we got partners like you two. And oh, hang on a second, who's actually going to do all that work? Because I
Right.
actually can't do it all by myself or with
Totally.
this little team of contractors that I have, right? Like it's the piece that so often gets missed. And it is brave to embrace the message that no, this business doesn't have to grow exponentially for it to be successful. Like the two things actually are not connected in any way.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
distinct and
Totally.
different. But we connect, we really get this message that they are connected, that you're not successful if your business is not growing.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's true at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Peter and I often have this conversation with clients. Like, you reflect on clients you've had, the ones that went sideways, the ones that you can't get rid of, the ones that you don't want to get rid of. And you go, okay, what works? Like, who are our people? And like, who do we get along with? And for a long time, we used to say, oh, well, it's probably because they don't have enough business experience. And, maybe we need to just set some limits on 2 to 5 years. Your business has to, and then, then you get
Yeah.
someone who's been in business for 15 years and it's like, oh, they don't know anything. Or you come on the other side and you go, wow, this person just started, but they get it and they understand. And there's almost this like maturity in business, right? This maturity. And I said to Peter, when we put together this fiscal year budget and we're an EOS company. So we did our vision traction organizer and all the things. And I said, you know what? This feels very mature. This feels
Yeah.
like maybe for the first time, we've been very realistic. We've been very authentic. We've both separated ourselves as partners in other things and thought really deeply about what do we want from the business. We've thought about leadership. We've thought about our people. And here's a really mature approach to the next year that I actually think is probably going to maybe backfire in terms of right sizing, because all of a sudden when you're focused on doing great work on what you have and not focused on hitting these huge milestones, you probably get more referrals and you probably get your current clients interested in giving you more. This
Yeah.
maturity in business, I think, do you see that? Do you
Yeah.
am I on to something?
Yeah, no, I think that you are on a couple different levels. And first of all, money's just a metric. It's
Mm.
just a measure of success. And it's actually one of about a gajillion different measures of success.
Right.
And so what the two of you have really done is you have decided to bring other measures of success into your business planning.
Mm.
For example, what does success look like in terms of our work-life blend?
Right.
We are parents, we are partners, we like to do stuff that does not add any value to the business. Adds value to our family. That is a measure of success. So you have started to expand beyond the traditional business plan and financial accounting agenda into this business is our life, but it doesn't have to be our whole life.
Right.
Which for many of us, and I count myself in this too, because I've made this mistake as well, is that we feel like revenue and profit are the two things that we really have to measure. Oh, and maybe throw some expenses in there, right?
Yeah.
Actually, your business plan can measure so much more. So,
Yeah.
that in itself is a win. And you've also decided to measure how you want to show up as leaders and the growth that you want to see in your team, not just in the business.
Yeah.
Right? And when we create great places to work, your example is perfect. When people are happy at work, they do better work and they work more without being asked. They do extra. And when they do extra, they make your clients happy. And when your clients are happy, they bring you more work and they bring you more clients. And the equation is actually quite simple. The execution is where we get caught up.
Right.
But that's essentially what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we obviously kind of put this business plan in front of our staff, and it was, we were a little nervous because we always had this growth trajectory and these financial goals and this, all this kind of stuff. And we sort of first one-on-one day with a bunch of different staff and just made sure that they're, and I, you know, there's always a risk of like, oh, are these people going to think that, oh, this company's not growing. This is not a safe place for me to be, and this and that. And actually we got such an opposite reaction. I was so pleased by, you know, first of all, several staff saying, you know, I don't really know why that was ever the goal. It didn't really make any sense to me, but you know, well, and that's to the point of your question. Does your team care about your vision, or do they just do enough to get by? Right. And then second of all, it's like actually the conversation was like, hey, you know what? This business plan allows us all to spend more time doing what we love. Allows us to all have, you know, more time to innovate within our jobs, more time to provide the best value possible to our clients. And it seems like they all loved it. So yeah, it was kind of a really aha moment for me personally. Yeah, I think more people need to reflect on that, right?
I really do. Some people call me naive, but I really do believe that people show up every day wanting to do great work. They want to have an impact. They want to deliver. And not everybody, like, let's be clear, there's
Yeah.
always slackers, like, but I think for the most part, people want to go to work and they want to feel like what they do is important. And when you actually show them that they can do the important work, they are invested. They're 110%, right? And again, that's when they're going to show up differently for your clients, and your clients are just going to come with more work, and they're going to bring you more clients. I really do believe in that. And that doesn't mean that you have to have astronomical revenue goals. It really doesn't. I mean, we all want growth. Like, let's be clear. We're not talking about, hey, there's no top line stuff going on here. But it's not, I have to. It's not this urgency to, and this blind urgency in a lot of ways.
Well,
Yeah.
and
Well,
I think really for me, as someone who likes to get the accolades and likes to see growth, and like when you've set a growth trajectory for yourself, and then, you know, pivoting back to our conversation about, you know, the state of the world right now and the economy and whatever, and insert crisis here, you know, you're setting these goals and you're not reaching them, that becomes really hard as a business owner, right? Month after month seeing, oh, I didn't get it again. And, you know, being able to pause and go, hey, I've built something pretty cool. And hey, we've done some really great work this month, as opposed to, didn't hit the target again. I think really wears on the business owner. And then, of course, wears on you as a leader, right? I know that I'm showing up in conversations, and as a leader, you're trying to put your best self forward. But in the back of your mind, if you're constantly thinking about, ooh, the bottom line and didn't reach the goal and got to get further, I think it really does affect the overall work you do. I think also culturally too. I think Peter did a great job of touting for many years. He wanted us to get to a place where we were 80 to 90% capacity and had, you know, this time to think and to be innovative. Yet there was this kind of struggling dichotomy against, well, we've got to grow and we've got to hit this big. So it's like, okay, well, but as soon as I hit that 80% capacity, it's being filled with this 20% more that's new client work or growth work. So, you know, the lip service to a great balance wasn't matching the business owner's bottom line piece. And I think that, you know, that becomes hard from a leadership perspective too.
If you're not prepared to walk the talk, then don't say it at all.
Yeah.
If you want people to have Friday mornings to be innovative, then you can't book meetings, and you can't take that new client until next week. And you can't say one thing and do another. That is inordinately disengaging. Even if it's a small thing, the disengagement that someone feels on the other side is exponential, like 10 times or something, right? Like, so yes, as leaders, and particularly as business owners who also play big leadership roles, we have got to put our money where our mouth is. Cannot say one thing and then actually and functionally do something else. That doesn't jive.
Yeah, it's so interesting too, because I think about, you know, from a sales perspective, but back to innovation in this, and you know, back to artificial intelligence. So you know, I stay up at night. I don't sleep well at night these days because I'm worried about the future. I think this is going to have a really big impact on jobs and a big impact on certainly the marketing industry in a pretty big way. And again, when growth is our only objective, then my job as the sales leader in the organization is just to go sell, 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 sell. Whereas now we've taken our foot off that, sort of the pressure off that a little bit. And of course I'm selling, because you still got to keep selling. You got to still keep growing. You got to, you
Nature to
got
sell.
to
You
keep,
wouldn't be able to stop even if we wanted you to, right?
yeah,
So we
yeah.
are.
But now I'm innovating. Now I'm spending time thinking about, okay, and, it's interesting. I this weekend was thinking about this AI thing, and put a presentation together that I'm going to be giving next week to a group of people, and then I started reading an article, and all of a sudden all these new revenue opportunities kind of came up about, wow, you know what? This means we could do this, and this means we can do that, and all of a sudden we're not competing against 6,000 agencies on this. We can be really, really innovative, and all of a sudden it gave me new energy, and it gave me, right. So when you have time to stop and think and do all those things as a leader, I think then it really opens up new possibilities that you didn't even maybe consider when you were just going towards one singular goal the whole time, right?
You have to rest as hard as you work,
Mm.
especially as an entrepreneur and a business owner. You have to rest as hard as you work, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's true, because when you are constantly working and your brain, particularly the most conscious and focused pieces of your brain are engaged constantly, you don't have space for the cool, innovative, creative thoughts. You don't have space to connect new dots together, right? Which is what entrepreneurs do so well and so creatively. And so you have to rest and pause. And in that pause, know that new things are going to be possible.
Yeah, Peter, I think we figured this out this year in terms of, one, being a married couple working together, but also being business owners, in terms of, we do not have any meetings now that aren't off-site over a whiskey sour, in the right. There is this element of, especially with differing leadership styles, you have, a meeting where I've already got the spreadsheet up and he's just trying to vision and get some ideas, and I'm like, okay, tomorrow we'll start actioning. And it's like, okay, this environment doesn't work. But to your point, we're getting out, we're resting from the day to day. We're starting off with, casual conversations, right? It's like a date. But then all of a sudden you start flowing with great ideas, and what are you working on? And okay, and then the napkin comes out and the scribbles come. And I think that, again, this year, Peter, we really learned how to rest as leaders separately, but I think we figured out how to rest as leaders together to be able to kind of meld the minds.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah. That's really cool. Now you got to get the rest of your team to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do it individually and do it collectively, because you've got some horsepower.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how do you let them run?
Yeah. I love that.
That's the question mark.
Yeah. And to be able to go have some of those offsites without us, and to go do their, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's been the hardest part for us, as especially in a small business, is, Christina actually put this on our staff in an email this weekend, actually, about, this quarter, I want you guys, if you're going to a meeting with a client, there's an expectation that you're there to add value, to contribute, to say something, to your point, to let that horsepower go, because you are actually a person who's at that meeting because you actually have something to contribute, right? And I think that's really hard, especially in a small business, because I feel like the owners and the leaders in the small business are sort of, just always the voice and always the people talking. But yeah, how do you sort of step back and let the talent really shine, right? I think the big piece.
You prepare them, and then you coach them, and intuitively they're not going to get it right every time, right? So you set them up for success in the way that you introduce those things to them, and then you coach the opportunities, right? And I know that you two already do that, but that's the important part. And for so many of us, we start these businesses because we are passionate about a product or a service. Mm-hmm. It's something that we have poured our whole heart into, and probably most of our financial future. If I'm typical, right? Like, I got a lot riding on these businesses that we create, and it makes it really difficult for us to step back and let go. Mm-hmm. But we hamstring our business if we don't. And so we have to carefully curate the experience of these people. We hire them because we know they're smart. And at some point, we got to get out of the way, right? And then coach to the moments when we aren't finding the success. Like what is that? And how do we support someone through that, knowing they're smart and they're capable and they're the right person in the role to be working with that client?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Amazing conversation, Lindsay. I think probably we've got to wrap it up soon because we don't usually go too long. We could probably sit here and talk about this forever. But before we do wrap it up, maybe if I can let you have the last word in terms of really where we're at today. We talked about, I think there's a lot of headwinds. There's a lot of turbulence out there. We're still not even past the turbulence that was COVID. What is the number one piece of advice you give leaders today in terms of dealing and managing in these types of environments and times?
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice is make the investment in your own leadership journey, right? So, of course, I am a big advocate of coaching. It is my passion and my love. I love coaching leaders and executives in being a more authentic, more connected, and more purposeful leader, and invest in leadership for your team. Because we all lead. Everyone in your business has a leadership role, whether they're directly responsible for people and budget or not. They are a leader. And so when you make that investment in yourself first and in your team next, like close second, you absolutely add value to your organization. And the truth is, it will drive results. There's absolutely no doubt that the correlation is pretty clear. So that's my number one tip, if you will.
Love it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Really appreciate your words of wisdom and this amazing conversation. I think it was really enlightening. I got a lot out of it. I got a lot to reflect on myself. So I really appreciate it. I hope our audience appreciates it as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate having this conversation with both of you.
Totally. All right. Well, talk to everyone next time.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Two Babies in a Business. To learn more, visit ciprcommunications.com or catch us on our socials at CIPR Comms.